Hello, friends, and welcome to Home is Where the Body Is. I'm Jen, an ADHD woman with EDS, POTS, complex PTSD, and OCD, shaped by an abusive religious upbringing. I spent much of my life feeling like I was balancing precariously over an endless pit, constantly reaching for a stable home that always seemed just out of reach. Today, I can honestly say that home is wherever I am right now, built on the stable ground that's growing out of a deepening relationship with my body and myself. In this podcast, I share the lived experiences that brought me here in case it helps someone feel less alone or supports them on their own journey home. Today, I'll be talking about what dating and online dating specifically as an adult taught me about safety and relationships and trauma healing. So, online dating led me to the realization that no one owes me a relationship and that I am not entitled to a partner as a reward for my suffering or growth. Closely tied to this is the understanding that I can be my own parent, I can be my own savior, rather than seeking that role in someone else. And what I mean by this is that with complex PTSD, there's often that fantasy of a savior, of, someone will come in and will save you from the fact that you hate yourself and feel like you're unlovable, and they will come in with all this unconditional love that a parent never gave you but should have given you. And, it will fix it and everything will be better. And I think a lot of us learn the hard way that that's not possible. And even if it were possible, it wouldn't be healthy because it wouldn't be a partnership. It would be a parent child relationship. And that the only way to really get that unconditional love, parenting savior is to be that to yourself. At least that's what I've learned. Interestingly, I had some experiences lately where I'm curious if anyone else relates to this, but I have this urge to like save someone else or help someone else. Probably an unhealthy urge, right? To be like, oh, they're suffering like I suffered. I need to stop them from suffering. Um, and the question is like, why am I so motivated to just like insert myself and like just drop my whole life to like stop this person from, I don't know, entering into an unhealthy relationship, even though they're an adult and, are fully consenting, and I can't really tell them what to do or, exit one or whatever the case may be. Because, I made that mistake in the past and nobody was there to help me and all of these things. And it's like, how about instead of saving them, I save myself? You know? Like, I have, I just feel like I have so many experiences over the course of my life, especially as relates to childhood wounds, of seeing someone else, like maybe they're younger than me, I don't know, less far along in their healing journey, and I'm just like, oh my God, I know what that feels like. Nobody was there to save me when I was going through it, when I was so alone, and just existentially felt terrible. But then I remember that, like, or I think back and realize that even if someone had stepped in those situations, it wouldn't have done anything. Like, I ultimately had to be the one to save myself. I don't know if this is making any sense. I hope it's making sense. It was just a big realization for me that, like, I have this urge to parent or save other people, especially if I imagine, like, their poor inner children. But then my inner child was always like, well, what about me? And so when I finally turned that impulse inward to me, instead of being like, oh, I have to save them, I have to parent them because nobody did that for me, instead, turn it inward and be like, how about I save myself? How about I parent myself? And I give them the dignity, allow them the dignity and the autonomy to do the same for themselves, because that's the only way that this works. Okay, that was a little bit of a tangent, but ironically, when I started dating, so to give a little bit of background for anyone who hasn't listened to earlier episodes, I grew up in a extremely conservative religious cult environment. We weren't allowed to date. It was just like pray about it, straight to marriage. I got married very young. Then I got divorced also very young. I was married and divorced before I turned 22. And after I got divorced, I was like, oh, okay, I can do online dating and I can find like real love, not like weird cult religious marriage love, whatever. But I kind of viewed a relationship as something I was seeking in order to escape the terror of aloneness. Like I had left the cult, and along with leaving all of that control behind, I had also left behind whatever semblance of belonging and love I had had, even though it was like a controlling belonging and love. So, ironically, by viewing a romantic relationship as something I was seeking in order to escape that terror of aloneness, I was placing love and fear just as close together as the cult and my abusive parents ever had, right? I was trying to escape this environment where it was like, love God and fear God at the same time, Like, love and fear your husband who is your head, and those sorts of things. So it was like, ironically, in escaping this environment that tied love and fear and control together, I kind of perpetuated that by being like, "Oh, okay, I have to date so that I can escape this existential terror of aloneness." So it still was tying love and fear together. It wasn't until I learned that I could be my own parent and savior that I began to view adult romantic relationships in a healthier light. And by savior, I don't mean this in like a religious context. I mean this in, like I said, the complex PTSD fantasy, that savior fantasy of someone coming in and swooping in to fix all your problems and make you finally feel loved. That's what I mean. So ultimately, I learned that I wasn't owed a relationship by anyone. I feel like I also had um, this mindset. I think it comes alongside sometimes, at least for me, the complex PTSD savior fantasy, this feeling of being owed a relationship or owed this type of love because I suffered so much growing up. I feel like the cult also kind of instilled this into me a little bit. It was like, oh, if you're a good Christian, maybe you have shitty parents. They didn't say shitty, but you know what I mean. Maybe you have bad parents, but you'll grow up and you'll get the perfect husband. God will reward you with the perfect husband. The only person or the only people who had ever owed me a relationship were my parents, and they had already failed me. And eventually I realized that is okay because it also means I don't owe anyone else a relationship other than my own inner self. Healthy relationships are freely chosen out of desire rather than fear, and come with the corresponding consequence that those who seek them may never be chosen, or conversely, may never find someone they want to choose. However, we can always choose ourselves. I choose myself. Because I realized that I could be my own parent and savior, I shifted from dependence to self reliance. Instead of seeking safety, validation, and identity through a partner, I began providing these things for myself. This dissolved the fantasy of being rescued and replaced it with a grounded sense of agency. It also raised my standards and clarified my values, even though that came with disappointment and a much smaller dating pool. Most importantly, my sense of worth became internal rather than contingent on being chosen. So back to that, when I first started dating, online dating after escaping my teenage cult marriage, which is a wild thing to say, but I guess that's accurate. I was, like I said, terrified. I was terrified of being alone, but I was also so hopeful. Right, terrified at being alone for any significant amount of time because I had been forced into codependency with my parents and the cult they raised me in, and had never learned how to rely on myself to meet my own needs. But I was hopeful that I could finally find love that wasn't based in fear. But like I said, as I continued on this way, seeking a partner that in my unconscious fantasies resembled a parent or a savior more than an equal, as long as I continued to seek that, I would never find that love that wasn't based in fear. It would always be based in fear and learned helplessness, etc. I also want to say that I think this topic is particularly applicable right now. Um, I don't know if it's just because my standards have been raised so much by my own healing journey. I don't think so, based on feminist content that I see out in the interwebs. Dating is kind of wild right now, especially I'm looking at this from a heterosexual mindset. I am bisexual, but as we all know in online dating, the vast majority of people on there are men, and it is very like heteronormative. I'm convinced that some of these dating apps, even though I have both genders or I have all genders set, that I'm open to all genders, I am convinced that it will like show me men before it shows me women. Anyway, so although I am bisexual, I recently, relatively recently, came out and don't have a lot of experience dating women. But I think right now with the male loneliness quote epidemic, I personally don't think it's an epidemic. I think it's men making themselves lonely by perpetuating patriarchy. But anyway, and like women choosing not to have kids, or like the 4B movement in Korea, like no dating, marriage, sex, or kids with men, I think is the core of that movement. I think a lot of women are refusing the disproportionate emotional labor. A lot of women are raising their standards. A lot of women are, just refusing to be the default caretakers. We are refusing the role of doing all of the emotional labor and emotional regulation for a man in the home so that he can then go and earn a six-figure paycheck. Meanwhile, we, you know, struggle to make a living or whatever. I think a lot of women are refusing that. And so I think that this topic of like raising your standards because you realize that you can be all of these things for yourself and you don't need a man to be all of these things. Again, I'm speaking kind of more from a hetero lens. I think that it's kind of intertwined and relevant, right? I think a lot of women are left with a lot of wounds, like childhood wounds and caretaking impulses. And I think patriarchy, I feel like I've mentioned this in previous episodes, like the parentification episodes. Um, but patriarchy, I think, very much plays into this mindset of like, oh, don't worry, a man will take care of everything for you. You'll be his one and only. He'll give you all this love. He'll choose you. He'll take care of all your physical needs. Everything will be great. You'll just have to be his sex slave and emotional labor slave and domestic slave and all of these things, right? that's a good deal. No. I think for the first not for the first time, but maybe for the first time in larger numbers, or it's an increasing trend, women are saying no. And I do think that trauma healing is playing into this. So anyway, that was again a little bit of a tangent, but I think that it is relevant. So I recently got back into online dating again, like I've been off and on over the years. But like on the one hand, it was an immense grief to let go of the fantasy I had held for decades, the fantasy that I used to get me through my own difficult childhood, right? This belief that God would provide me with the perfect husband in order to compensate for my perfect tolerance of the suffering that my parents heaped upon me. But on the other hand, it was with a feeling of immense empowerment that I began providing for myself the very psychological safety and emotional attunement that had been denied to me as an infant. I no longer need someone to put me back together because now I can enforce boundaries long before there was a real risk of me falling apart. I no longer need the validation or protection of a man because I can now validate my own feelings and rely on my own resourcefulness for navigating the legitimately oftentimes dangerous world around me. By choosing myself, I removed the need for external conditions, especially a relationship, to feel whole or complete. I begin to build an internal home out of self trust, boundaries, and emotional attunement. Because I can meet my own needs, my sense of belonging is no longer tied to another person's presence or approval. And so this allows me to exist anywhere, with or without a partner, and still feel grounded, whole, and at home within myself. It's funny, even though my dating pool, I mean, honestly, is like non existent. I don't think I've sent a like in like weeks or months on the dating apps. But it's just funny how I feel like once you heal or at least in my experience, like once I heal my trauma wounds, I don't know, I just feel a lot less attracted to quite a lot of men out there. It's like it's almost like some of that, well, I mean, it's probably true that some of that attraction was due to like patriarchal conditioning. And now I feel kind of more drawn to women specifically. Um, I've been getting into lesbian romance books lately, and that's been super fun. But anyway, I also want to mention that I do think there's kind of a caveat that there is difficulty sometimes with practically providing for ourselves when we're marginalized, when we're traumatized, when we're women, when we're autistic, etc. Um, this is a patriarchal, ableist, capitalist hellscape. And, right now in America, with this current administration, it is very obvious that they are trying to force women back into the home. They're trying to take away our vote. They're like messing with tax credits or whatever to try to incentivize women to have kids and stay home. And they're freaking out that like teenagers are having fewer babies. So, like, you know, you are not set up for success if you are marginalized in any capacity in this society, especially in this current administration. I believe there are studies showing that like black women are being forced out of the workforce, like they're being laid off in disproportionate amounts. I fully believe that. I was recently laid off. I'm not black, but I am, a woman and have many disabilities. I truly believe that these layoffs are disproportionately affecting marginalized people. They're certainly disproportionately affecting like younger, less experienced people because of the first in, first out type of thing. But I just want to add this caveat that like maybe sometimes you kind of do need a certain person to help you out financially. Like some people stay with parents even though they're not necessarily great for their mental health, but they're tolerable and they offer free room and board. And sometimes you need to do that to build up savings because it's just not practical in this economy to go live on your own while you're job searching or whatever. Sometimes people really are extremely financially dependent on their partners. And maybe they are doing all of the emotional labor and they don't want to anymore, but maybe they also don't yet see a pathway to not being destitute if they leave, especially if they have kids. So I just want to add the caveat that this isn't some magical, like, oh, I declare I can take care of myself now. Therefore, my disabled body will magically just be able to do everything and I'll never struggle financially. Like, no, that's not true. There's a reason that a lot of women end up, specifically autistic women. I see this in like the autism in women subreddit all the time, where women are just financially dependent on men and they would leave if they had financial independence. So I just want to mention that in case you're sitting there thinking, wow, Jen, this is great and all, but like you're privileged to not have to um depend on a relationship in order for like financial support, financial stability. And I agree. I have depended on both parents and a partner as an adult in the past for financial support. I don't currently because I have savings and I am privileged to have those savings. Like I fully believe, I'll try not to go on too much of a tangent here, but I fully believe that having savings like it's really just a privilege. I mean, yes, there's the argument that like you have financial literacy, did delayed what is it, delayed returns where you don't buy something for yourself now, like that takes self-control. And I get that. But like I don't know, people with ADHD, I mean, I do have ADHD, but that makes impulse control harder. So maybe it's a privilege to be able to exercise proper impulse control. I grew up in a relatively financially literate household. So well, to be fair, I left not knowing how to do taxes or invest, but I had some level of financial literacy that I was able to pull on. I got an advanced degree because my parents had money to pay for my school. Well, for my undergrad, I had my grad school funded, but I'm just trying to say that I fully believe that a lot of financial success is due to varying levels of privilege. So I want to acknowledge that yes, I am privileged to be able to currently, while unemployed, have first of all, have unemployment payments. It can be very difficult to jump through all the hoops required to get those approved. And to have then savings once the unemployment runs out. So just wanted to add that caveat. Hope that wasn't too much of a tangent. Okay. Um, I also do think that it is funny, it's ironic that given that like my coming out journey and my trauma healing journey kind of coincided that even as I even as my dating pool expanded to include all genders, it still like unexpectedly shrank. Um wait, did I say to include all genders or did I say all standards? Whatever. Rephrase. Even as my dating pool expanded to include all genders once I came out as bisexual, um, realized that the vast majority of online dating profiles no longer meet my now much higher standards. So now I've got all the genders, but my standards are much higher, and the vast majority of men, at least, don't meet them anymore. So my dating pool has shrunk. So, like I said, particularly in heterosexual dating culture, men often unconsciously, and to be fair, this is often unconscious, expect women to do the emotional labor of building connections and diffusing conflict, eschewing the need to build emotional maturity themselves. And, I think this unconscious entitlement, it's it's present even in the very earliest stages of dating. like I noticed this in looking at profiles, like the women's profiles, just personally from what I've noticed, do tend to be a little bit higher effort. Like men tend to have really low effort pictures. Some of them have good ones, but usually not. Or it's just a bunch of pictures of their pets instead of them, and it's just like very generic language. I mean, women do it too. Um, I guess I'm just trying to say that like there are a lot of men out there who just have these like bare minimum profiles, and then and even if you do start chatting with them, at least what I've noticed is a lot of times you have to drive the conversation, and that is a form of emotional labor. Like I had this one guy complain that it felt like I was interviewing him, and I was like, "Yeah, asshole, because you're not asking me any questions back." But apparently, he wanted me to ask him about like his work, and then he proceeded to mansplain um, our shared um, work field. I guess we worked in like similar physics engineering areas, and then he like mansplained it to me, and I was like, I'm done. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm just trying to point out that I think I personally was ignorant for so long, and so I'm assuming a lot of other women are as well, of like how insidious this is and how early it can show up. It's not just, oh, you've been dating for 3 years, you live together, he never cleans the toilet or um, whatever, picks his dirty socks up off the floor, and if he has a bad day at work, you have to fix it for him, even though you had a bad day at work too. Like, it's not just that, it's even just way earlier in the dating process where, again, not all, but some, a lot of men seem to kind of just have this unconscious expectation that the woman will drive even the early stages of connection by asking the right questions, showing the curiosity, stroking their ego, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's another tangent. But having painstakingly built the emotional regulation, attunement, and conflict resolution skills required to parent myself and meet my own needs, this realization that the vast majority of dating prospects had not done that, it left me quite disappointed. I had been the obedient Christian, and then I grieved the fantasy relationship that was denied to me when I left Christianity, and then I became the relatively emotional, mature, romantic partner that I wanted to be. So it kind of transferred that expectation that, like, now I'm owed something. Like, I feel like from the cult and from like complex PTSD, I felt like, oh, I'm owed the perfect husband because I put up with all this shit and I was a good Christian and I'm traumatized and I need someone to save me. But I feel like even as I kind of grew out of that, I still felt like, hey, I did all this work to heal and become, again, relatively emotionally mature. I studied conflict resolution styles, practiced them, learned how to regulate, which is like really key in conflict. So, aren't I owed an equally emotionally mature partner with whom to spend the remainder of my days in happily committed bliss? And the answer, of course, like I said before, was no. I'm not owed a relationship by anyone ever, except my parents who already failed. But neither do I owe anyone a relationship. And I think this is kind of the key for me, maybe the key takeaway, is that if you heal these trauma patterns and kind of learn to feel safety when you're alone with yourself, take care of yourself, be emotionally self sufficient, etc. I mean, of course, take offers of co regulation when they're offered, but, being able to take care of yourself if not. Once you get there, there may not be people to date who are also at that level, especially if you're a straight woman, which I am a little bit grateful that I'm not a straight woman. Um, but the answer then isn't to drop your standards. Like dating apps do the thing where after you swipe through everybody and you have no more matches, then it will just like recycle and bring back the people and be like, take another look, take another look. And I feel like that's dating apps trying to be like, drop your standards. Why don't you drop your standards? Look, there's nobody else. You gotta pick this guy, right? I mean, he's kind of cute, maybe, if you squinted and ignored that blatantly racist joke that he made or whatever. Um, it's that's not the answer. And it really hurts, I think, that the answer is maybe I will just be alone. Well, I mean, not totally alone, right? Because friendships are a thing. And that's the thing that a lot of men who are very lonely, I think, don't understand. Like the male loneliness epidemic is they're very much focused on romantic companionship specifically and kind of don't really focus on community and friendship instead. Um, and of course, some women do that, and I've done that in the past, and it's a product of this very like nuclear family normative society. Anyway, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. The point being that I have reached this place where I would rather keep my standards up and take care of myself than drop my standards and, you know, um, be like emotionally dependent on someone else. Because that's kind of what it would have to be if the other person can't meet you in a healthy way in a healthy relationship, then it's kind of going to by default be a not healthy relationship. And I have already done the healing to get out of that type of unhealthy patterning. So anyway, I think I've talked long enough. I will conclude here. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The safety, love, and belonging that I spent years searching for in other people was never something they could reliably give me. It was something that my parents failed to either provide for me or teach me to provide for myself, and something I had to build within myself regardless. No relationship can substitute for self trust, and no partner can replace the work of learning how to show up for your own life. And while that means nothing is guaranteed, no perfect partner, no promised ending, no fairy tale, it also means something far more powerful. I am never abandoned as long as I choose myself. From that place, love is no longer about escape or survival. It becomes a choice, freely given, rooted in desire rather than fear. And whether I walk that path alone or alongside someone else, I am already home. As we come to the end of this episode, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. If something here resonated, you're always welcome to reach out or share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to support this podcast, the most helpful thing you can do is subscribe on YouTube and engage with the video. Like, comment, or share it with someone who might need it. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leaving a review there also really helps. You've been listening to Home is Where the Body Is. I'm Jen, and I wish you a safe journey home.